When was the last time you went to the zoo? You went to the zoo and you saw the zebras and the birds and maybe the reptiles and some bears and lions and tigers, and your kids were there and they fed the giraffes and all that fun stuff. Well, today I'm so excited. My guest is a zookeeper. The official title is the Assistant Curator of Birds. Her name is Alexandra Rowland, and I've known her for years, and she has just inspired me with her passion of conservation and stewardship of the animals and the wild animals in our world. So, welcome to this episode of Crushing It with Your Tribe with zookeeper Alexandra Rowland.
As a Texas realtor, Robin McCoy is in the unique position to meet and know so many different people in a wide range of industries. These people are her tribe, and she leverages them not only to help her business, but to help theirs as well. Welcome to Crushing It with Your Tribe, where we share real talk about building business and life relationships. Here is your host, Robin McCoy.
Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Robin. I'm really excited.
So, for people that don't know, Alexandra and I met years now. I don't even know how. I mean, your daughter was, like
2.5, 3.
Oh, yeah, she was like
Little.
not in school. And she's now graduating high school, I believe.
She will be this year, yes.
So we've known each other for a long time. When she and her family moved to Texas for a while, and then because she got a job with the Dallas Zoo, and then next thing we know, she has picked up, and she's fast forward a few years, and now she is in Virginia working for the zoo. So we are so glad to have you here, because I've always just been fascinated by what you do. And I think it's really cool because I don't know anybody else that works in a zoo.
We get that as a lot as an industry. We definitely get that. I think the only zookeeper I know.
Yeah, you are the only zookeeper. But you know what? If anybody ever said, "Do you know a zookeeper?" and I could win $1 million if I did, I do know a zookeeper. So now everybody else does too. I can name one. So there you go.
Yes.
So what we want to talk about today, Alexandra, is just really how you landed at the zoo and why you love it. So why don't you take us back and tell me how it all started?
We got to go way back to when I was a kid.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I kind of grew up watching Jungle Jack Hanna, right? And programs like that on PBS and National Geographic and Wild Earth and all these things that just really inspired me with a deep love of wildlife and animals and conservation. And also, nerd alert here, I watched and loved some Captain Planet, of all things. If you remember that kind of obscure 90s cartoon. It was all about environmental conservation and fighting the good fight. Acid rain is bad and global warming. And I kind of combined that together for a love of like wildlife conservation. So I knew I always wanted to work with animals. I knew I wanted to be a part of that big movement. And as I got older and older, people were like, well, you should be a veterinarian. And I was like, I don't really see the medicine side of it so much, and it's particularly not the domestic side.
Right.
I knew my heart was with wildlife and conservation, not the domestic side. Nothing wrong with domestics.
You have your share of domestics.
Yeah, I have my own domestics, and I love them desperately. But I wanted to do something different. So when I became of age, I decided, you know what, let me just try the domestic thing. So I actually volunteered at a shelter, right, with foster cats and dogs. And it was great. And when I was a teen, I did stuff with horses and hoof stock. And then I started volunteering at a place called Carolina Raptor Center, which in North Carolina. And it does birds of prey. So hawks, eagles, owls, falcons, kites, you name it. And I fell in love. I knew immediately this was it for me.
This is it. This is it.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was going to be birds initially, that birds was going to take my heart and soul, but it was everything I wanted, because they did wildlife rehabilitation, where patients would come in sick or injured and they'd be returned to the wild if they could, or they did education, they did outreach, They contributed to the scientific body of knowledge around how to care for these animals, and they had a trail for people to come and be inspired by the non-releasable animals that came through the clinic that couldn't be returned to the wild. So it was this multifaceted approach. And so I started volunteering, I started going to school, I eventually got a part-time job there, and eventually got promoted and worked full-time for Carolina Raptor Center many years ago. And that's kind of how I got my start. And then the economic downturn unfortunately happened. And being a very small nonprofit, I had to kind of shift gears. And that's kind of when I moved into the zoo world through Zoo Atlanta and then Dallas Zoo and now Virginia Zoo. Even though it's not native wildlife for the most part that I'm working with now, for the most part, it's still very conservation oriented and conservation minded. And it still fills that childlike well that's in me where I want to make a difference.
Well, I think it's awesome that at such a young age, right? You found it, right? And now these years later, you've been able to, just continue that love of birds, right?
Yeah.
And the birds of prey, which, and we've talked about this, I live on a creek and there are hawks and all kinds of birds that are all in that backyard. And they probably keep my yard free from mice and some rats and some snakes. So I'm grateful for all of those.
Definitely. They're good. They're good to have in your backyard.
They are good to have in the backyard. And they're so beautiful, and the owls and all of it are just so cool. So tell me a little bit about, the birds that you work with. I mean, when you say birds of prey or the raptors,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean?
Yeah. So right now I don't work with too many raptors, but historically, yeah. So I worked with birds of prey with raptors. So those were raptors are again like hawks, eagles, or owls. They have three sharp things, is what we used to like to tell people. They have very sharp eyesight.
Okay.
They used to say that a red-tailed hawk could see a mouse from a football field away, which is pretty impressive.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
We typically don't see them until we're about to step on them. So I'm going to say that that's pretty good.
Exactly. The second sharp thing that raptors all have in common are their talons, right? So those razor sharp talons that they use to catch and kill things. That's what raptors are going to use. You think about pelicans and they use their mouths to catch fish. Well, birds of prey, raptors, are going to use their feet to catch and kill. They've got immense strength and power in them, most of them. And they're going to use those talons kind of like we use a knife and a fork with their beak in combination to rip and tear chunks and swallow whole because they don't have teeth, right?
Okay.
And then the third sharp thing they have is incredible eyesight. Or wait, I already said that one. Didn't I?
Yes.
Eyesight?
Eyes, talons.
Eyes, talons. Let's see. They've
Beaks?
got razor sharp beaks. Yes, they're beaks. I just kind of lumped it into one. Yes, they're beaks. Their beaks are razor
Like,
sharp.
it's either beaks or hearing. It's going to be one or the other.
Yep, I just lumped it into one. I was like, yeah, they're talons and then they're beaks. It's because they use them in tandem often.
Yeah.
So they're going to use those razor sharp beaks to rip and tear, right? So those are kind of the three sharp things that raptors have. And I've worked with everything from bald eagles and golden eagles, Harris's hawks, barred owls, screech owls, kestrels, falcons, like you name it.
Now, how dangerous is that for you as a human working with something that could probably, take a good chunk out of your arm if it were so inclined?
It's nothing to be sneezed at, but it's not that bad when you are properly trained, right?
Yeah.
Anything that you're well trained at, you can, if you're doing it properly, you're not going to get hurt most likely.
Right.
I've seen some injuries. I've had some scratches. I've been in the industry over 20 years. It's going to happen.
Right.
But for the most part, it's not too bad. You handle their feet, which are the most dangerous bits of the birds of prey, and their beaks separately so that those dangerous parts are contained while you're working on other things. But when you have, and that's in a wildlife rehab situation, but when you are in a situation like you might see in a falconry show at, like, say, the Renaissance Festival, those birds are very well trained. They sit on your glove. They do have sharp talons, which is why we wear leather gloves that are usually 2 or 3 times thick with nice strong leather there. And they're fed tidbits of meat when you're doing that sort of thing, just as kind of a reward, like,
Yeah.
hey, have a snack. It's good. All things are happy. It's not inherently dangerous, but you can definitely make some poor decisions if you're
I guess you could
yeah,
with anything.
exactly, like you can with anything.
Anything, you know.
I definitely have worked with more dangerous birds since those early days. Right
Yeah.
now, I work with cassowaries, which are the world's most dangerous bird.
And what say that again?
A cassowary.
I've never heard of that.
So cassowaries are native to Australia, uh,
Okay.
and they are a very large bird. They're ratite, so they are a relative of ostrich, of emu. If
Oh,
you're familiar
okay.
with those, rheas. They're very big. They're mostly black. They've got red and blue on their chest and neck. They're gorgeous birds. But the females are about 80 kgs. So we're talking, the size of an adult human. 160 to 200 pounds. I mean, we're a big bird. And they have 3 toes. And their nails, we don't really call them talons, but their nails can be 5 inches long, like a razor. And they can inflict serious damage, and they have in fact killed people in the world. Yes,
Wow.
they're incredible.
So they're like so do they fly like I mean, an ostrich doesn't fly. They're like ostriches, right?
Correct. They are non-flighted. They are way too heavy to fly.
I was
Humans
gonna say
can't
200
fly.
pounds. I'd like to see that try and fly.
Their wings are actually really tiny. They're like the size of my hand. They're
Oh my gosh.
small, so you don't really see them. They're more vestigial wings, but they're big, beautiful birds. But they are very dangerous, and so we don't go in free contact with them. That is what we
Huh.
call a protected contact situation, where we shift them to different areas so that we can clean the different areas that they inhabit. And provide enrichment and different things like that for them, but we're never in direct contact with
Oh, so are they just mean or are they just protective?
Be the leader you know you can be. Build your professional network and access education that takes you where you want to go. We are women of all ages and backgrounds. You deserve national recognition and opportunities to build relationships with people you want to work and grow with. Hit the ground running with the Charisma chapter of the American Business Women's Association. Meetings each month from 6 to 8:30 p.m. on the fourth Tuesday in Farmers Branch, Texas, and online. Come with us. Experience ABWA for yourself. Go to charisma.abwa.org to learn more.
So are they just mean or are they just protective?
Neither. They're wild animals,
Oh
right?
yeah, there's that. Robin, they're wild animals.
They're wild animals. They wander around and they do their wild animal thing. But these guys are great. They love to train. They love to interact. Some of them do, and they appreciate enrichment. They appreciate. They have things that they like. A couple of our cassowaries really love grapes, and we can offer those as treats, especially when we're training them to shift or get on the scale so that we can see how much they weigh. We can use treats like grapes and encourage them to stand on the scale or to shift outside, provide them a treat, close the door, do what we need to do. And so they're motivated in that respect. They can be very territorial during breeding season. So that is something different. But on the whole, they're just a wild animal.
They're just a
Yeah.
wild animal doing wild animal things.
Yeah. We just have to be mindful and respectful of that. And that's kind of true across the board, whether or not you're working
Sure.
with a cassowary or a hawk or a lion or a monkey or a gibbon. Any of those, you just need to be respectful.
Well, and I think sometimes people, I mean, and you see it in national parks all the time, people trying to pet the bison, that kind of thing. While I think sometimes we get desensitized because, oh, look, it's in this cage or it's in this pen or whatever sort of animal. We're used to seeing them in a zoo where they seem relatively harmless and they're not. And when you see people that, things happen or they put their fingers in the cage and they wonder why the thing bit them. Well, because you put your hand in the cage, right? And I think us humans have been desensitized to the wildness
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
these animals.
Yes, I think
So,
that's a really good point, and I think one that zoos in general are trying to reinforce that while we are maintaining these animals for conservation purposes, which we'll get into a little bit later, they are not pets. None of them
right,
are pets. These
right.
guys are all wild animals. We are all highly trained professionals, and we work within a set of defined parameters that keep us safe, the animals safe, the animals healthy. And that's really paramount. And people who come in and make those kind of mistakes, just they're not aware. I don't think that they mean any harm. They just
Right.
don't understand all of what goes into what we do.
Well,
So,
because you're not training them for pets, right? Like you said, the conservation of so many of our animals is so important because, I was talking to somebody and I think it was a white rhinoceros. They're virtually extinct. There are only two left in the world and they're both female.
mhm,
So they cannot reproduce.
mhm.
And so there's so many animals that are in this situation, and by keeping high quality zoos that are about conservation and protecting those animals and keeping them within our planet.
Yes. Yes, and that is a huge part of what, I think, again, zoos are trying to promote and get out there is that we're not just keeping animals, we are keeping populations
Yeah.
alive. Like you mentioned, there's some populations that may be beyond recovery at this point, but zoos, especially, zoos that are accredited zoos, those are
Mhm.
gonna be zoos that are accredited by the, Association of Zoos and Aquariums. It's a high, standard that you have to live up to and meet all of these qualifications and do all of these accreditations and inspections every 5 years to maintain. And only about 10% of zoos
Oh, is it?
qualify for that.
Oh,
So it's
oh
actually a
my
very
goodness.
small number.
It is
So
a small number.
it is, out of all the zoos in the US, only about 10% are accredited because it is such a high standard and it exists for a reason because
Yeah.
those zoos that have historically really stepped up and saved species. Everything from the whooping crane, which has been brought back from just about extinction, with
Mm.
only a dozen or slightly more birds, just 50 years ago, to we're looking at over 200 birds now. Which 200 birds doesn't seem like a lot, but that is a huge jump,
Huge.
and that's with concerted efforts from zoos and partners that are breeding these cranes and providing them opportunities to develop and go back into the wild, and part of reintroduction programs. And while I was at Dallas Zoo, they began working with whooping cranes as a species and are working to reintroduce chicks there from the to the wild. And that's a really
That's
great
cool.
program that I got to see the start of. Unfortunately, did not get to stay for very long for part of it. But they're doing fabulous work with whooping cranes at Dallas right now for all your Dallas local listeners,
Yeah.
which you just
Yeah.
can't say enough good things about them and the conservation work that they do. Black-footed ferrets are another one that zoos have brought back from extinction. Zoos right now are working with a type of Guam kingfisher type species, working to save them and bring them back. And the things that live around water and eat the things in water are going to tell you quicker than anything else
Yeah.
what's going on in that ecosystem. And so it starts off as this big global thing, right? Like birds around the world. We don't have whooping cranes here in Virginia. They don't migrate through here, but whooping cranes do live in Canada, and they live in Texas, and they live in Louisiana, and they can tell you about the health of the water programs there. Which there are other species of cranes, like sandhills, that do kind of come over further east, and they can kind of illuminate what's going on in the eastern waters. And it kind of comes down to watching these animals and what they're responding to in the environment so that we can take notice as people. Okay, if it's affecting these animals, it could be affecting me. and vice versa. What I'm doing is affecting them. So we might throw something out of the car window, like an apple core or a cigarette butt, and not think anything of it. Oh, it's just going to degrade. Well, maybe, but it's also going to get washed down the street, and thinking of like plastics and microplastics, and it's going to go into the rivers, and it's going to go into the ocean, and it's going to affect the ocean life who will consume it, who will then get consumed, right? So it just becomes this cycle.
You know,
It's
when you were
crazy.
in grade school and they saw you had this cycle of life, right? It's true.
It really is.
It's
And we
true.
have a direct impact on that. And it's incredible to think about. Like, you kind of get lost in how big it is.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I think you don't, you talked about the Dallas Zoo and the whooping cranes and how each individual zoo is doing different things.
Mhm.
And as I understand it, I mean, the zoos can often work together,
Yes.
right? So if the Virginia Zoo needs X and Dallas Zoo has one, or maybe I read this on giraffes that you have to kind of keep the males away from each other
Mhm.
because they don't get along and or something like that. And so you got to take this male giraffe and send it to that zoo when
Mhm.
there's reach a certain age. And then this one comes over there. So I'm guessing that probably happens with all species within the
It
zoo.
Yeah, it really does. So a little bit what you're talking about are called species sustainability programs.
Okay.
So that comes down a little bit to health and genetics. It's actually largely what it's about, and making sure that we're not promoting inbreeding, because as
Yeah.
we all
It's a little
know,
too cross.
inbreeding kind of not good.
Right.
And so there are population biologists who are scientists who look at the genetics of every single individual in a population that's ever been recorded. So it's not just current, this is going back generations. And they develop what are called stud books, essentially. And then they look at all the genetics, and they run all the statistical analyses and do all this fancy math stuff. And then they pop out matches that say, okay, well, this individual genetically matches well with this animal. And if they produce offspring, it would be most likely to be healthy and beneficial for the population to continue to have variability and a healthy genetic line. Does that mean we're always going to take the first one? No, because sometimes it's not feasible. You might have this one's a perfect genetic match for this one, but this one's 45 years old and no longer genetically um, are no longer young enough to make babies, kind of thing. So we
Past its reproductive time frame.
so we might not make that, well, that they look really good on paper, but in real life,
In real
you know,
life, that's not gonna work.
exactly. Or just like in real life, you might have a pair that's been put together because they have a good genetic match, but their personalities, when you get them together, not a match.
Yeah, kinda like dating. I know we might make beautiful babies, but I don't like you very much.
Exactly, and that happens too. And so that's where the keeper rules are really important.
Right.
So, we might pair up somebody because it was recommended, and then find it's not working. And so then we go back to the SSP and be like, hey, they're not a good match. They're not compatible. Let's try something else. And sometimes the SSP will come back and say, well, hey, here's some techniques and different things that you can see. Maybe they like a little berry white. Not really. That's a joke. But maybe they like some candles. I don't know. Um,
Just try and make it
right?
romantic for them.
Right? But they can come back with different ideas for how to introduce to get a match. And sometimes it just takes time. And sometimes it's definitely a no. And then they will, work to
Sure.
reassign. But they can work with you because they are kind of the experts on that
Yeah.
species. Every species in a zoo does not have an SSP, but many, many do. And those are really important. To again ensure that health and genetic vitality for generations to come.
I think that's awesome. I just, and I can see how excited you get when you start talking about it. You love it.
I
I mean,
do, I do. I think it's really important.
I think it is too. And I think it's again, that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you is to get this out there because we just go on about our lives and then I hear that, there's only 2 white rhinoceroses left on the planet, so they're done.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking. And So I just, it is important, and that's why I wanted to talk with you about it, because I knew it's a passion of yours. Now tell me, how do you, so you become a zookeeper. How do you get there? I mean, what schooling, or what do you need to know, or who do you need to know? Do you need to know a whooping crane to be able to go?
No, it's a really common question. It's a great question. Um, Zookeepers come from all kinds of backgrounds. The vast majority of zookeepers today have at least a bachelor's degree. Some have an associate's, and some have a master's. Occasionally, you'll find people up higher in the industry, like those genetic scientists, have PhDs, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Vast majority are bachelor's degree holders. But I always tell people a bachelor's degree is not your doorway in to the zoo industry. Just walking straight out of college with no experience and trying to get a job at a zoo as a keeper, not going to happen. Practical experience is super important. You can have all the book knowledge in the world, but actually applying it in the situation is really, really critical. So I always tell people, go to school, get your degree, but also get practical hands-on experience. You can start by volunteering. You can volunteer at a shelter. You can volunteer at a zoo. You can volunteer as a foster. Like, lots of programs need fosters. So you can start small. You don't have to start with wild animals. And every zoo is going to be set up differently on what they allow their volunteers to do. But start volunteering. If you have the luxury of living near a zoo that has an internship program, some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid, get that internship if you can. They're highly competitive. But definitely try to get an internship. If you can get a seasonal position or a temporary position, try to get those. Anything that you can do to work with animals as hands-on as you can be is going to help you, in addition to having that degree. I'm in a hiring role right now, and most of the people that I hire, and even when I wasn't in a hiring role, most of the people that we would hire seem to have at least 3 hands-on jobs before getting a job at the place where I'm at. So it's very, very competitive.
I was going to ask, I mean, are there enough people in these roles? Are there enough people coming in with the interest and the experience to fill these positions?
Yes and no. So one thing that we are finding, and there's some great studies that have come out recently, actually pertaining to the zoo world. Diversity is something that the zoo industry as a whole kind of lacks, and we are making headway and strides to being a more diverse community. And so it's really important to reach everyone, and in order to reach everyone, we have to include everyone. There's something to be said for seeing yourself and who's working.
Sure.
And so we don't get enough candidates from certain pools, and we get a lot of candidates from other pools. And there's always, it's hard because we're a passion profession. Any zookeeper will tell you everybody wants to be a zookeeper because we're all passionate about wildlife. We all love animals. But there does seem to be a subsection of people who come in and they really love what they do, but it's a really hard industry, emotionally, physically, psychologically. It's exhausting sometimes. When you're doing round the clock care for babies, potentially, it's hard. Or when older animals get older and things happen, because that's what happens.
Yeah.
It's
I'm sure you bond with them, right? I mean,
for sure.
if you work, because you don't work with all the animals, you
Correct.
work with these animals
Correct.
or this bird, like you
Correct.
said, this bird, and you get to know them.
Yes.
You know their personality, you
Yes.
know what their likes and their dislikes, you know how they're going to behave in this situation or that situation. And, just like they're not pets, but it's like your pet, it's like you're bonded with them. And if they have to leave to go to another zoo, or like you said, they get older and, they've got a life cycle as well.
Correct.
It's gotta be,
It is. It's very, very hard. And not everybody can do it.
Yeah.
And that's okay because it's hard. It's hard when we lose a pet, and it's hard when we lose an animal that we are attached to.
Yeah.
They're not pets, but we have worked really hard to develop bonds and worked really hard to strengthen those bonds and that trust that we have with these animals so that we can do the best for them. Um, and it can be hard, like you said, when we have to send an animal away to another zoo because it was recommended. It's, like saying
No,
goodbye
not
to the loved
him.
one.
Not
Yes,
him.
exactly, exactly.
Him, but not him.
Exactly, exactly. It's so hard.
So,
But
since
the
we're kind of
smaller
talking about that, though, what does one have to study? Like, I mean, is it a biology degree? Is it what kind of degree is it that somebody should come out of college with?
Yeah, so we can be flexible, right? So the biology degree is great. That's common. Many zookeepers have that. Wildlife fisheries is another common one. Zoology is a good one. Um, we also psychology is also another big one, and that really comes into play. People always get a little confused, but it comes into play with training, animal behavior and training, and learning the basics of how to use operant conditioning and building positive relationships and positive reinforcement to elicit behaviors from the animals that are going to benefit them, such as when you ask them to voluntarily get on a scale so that you don't have to uh, manhandle them. So most of our animals they are put, they know the scale and they come right on the scale and they sit there. And we can get weights as often as we want. We can get them every day. We can get them every couple weeks. And that's just a really good, easy way to uh, follow their health progress or any changes that might be happening with the animal. Maybe they're getting a little too hefty with their diet, or maybe they're carrying something extra. Um, you know, so it's a really good basic way. But there's other situations. Many big cats and birds are trained to present either a tail or a wing for a blood draw, for a voluntary blood draw, so that it's not a stressful thing where you have to, again, handle them for a medical procedure. You can just hold out your wing or put out your tail and you take the blood. And it's really just like you would at the doctor's. And that kind of compliance or respect and understanding only comes with a lot of training and
Yeah.
positive reinforcement and that relationship that's built between the animal and the keeper.
So what do you do? What is I go to work today and, the high points of because you mean, like you said, it's a hard job and it's
Yes.
physically difficult and emotionally and all the things. So, my job as a zookeeper. Hi, I'm Robin McCoy, a Texas realtor for over 15 years. As the adult child of a senior needing to make a living change, I know firsthand the stress that can be involved in guiding our seniors and their families through the challenging decisions surrounding senior living. From adapting your current home for aging in place to finding the right senior community, I provide comprehensive support tailored to your unique needs. By offering these specialized services, I aim to make the transition to senior living as smooth as possible, providing you and your family with peace of mind and confidence in every decision. For more information, go to robinmccoysenior.solutions.com and let me take some of the stress of senior moves away. Relax, I've got this. Like you said, it's a hard job and it's physically difficult and emotionally and all the things. So, my job as a zookeeper.
Yeah, so zookeepers in general, we go to work, we have our morning meeting, we go take care of the animals. What that looks like, we're feeding, we're cleaning, we're checking the habitats for safety, both for the animal and for the public as well, making sure that the public is not at risk. Maybe a tree fell overnight and we need to have that removed from the public path so that the public is not at risk of tripping over the tree, something like that. So we're checking all of those things. We're providing fresh food, often better than what I eat, like lots of fresh fruits and veggies and salads. It's amazing what we feed these animals. Seriously.
That's so funny.
We provide fresh water. We provide enrichment. And enrichment can be anything that we add to their environment. That stimulates them in some way. It can be something like scents for a cat. We can put perfume or cologne on a rock and they smell and rub all over it, or catnip, right? Or you can put toys in that they can play with, like big boomer balls that they can attack. You can put food and hide it in different places, so that the animals have to search and forage for it. It gives them something to do throughout the day. And so we can do all of those kind of enriching different activities for the animals. And again, with their habitat, cleaning, and maintenance. For some animals that are recommended for breeding, we also do breeding activities. So what that means for birds, maybe supplying nesting material, right? In some situations, it means having the animals shift into each other's spaces so that they can be allowed to go through the copulatory processes. And in other cases, again with birds, it might mean that we have to handle the eggs ourselves that are laid to take care of them. It could be that the parents are inexperienced and not wanting to incubate their egg. They don't know what to do. Or it could be that there is a high risk of predation from, say, raccoons or possums or anything. Like little eggs could be prone to being eaten by snakes. So in some situations, we need to intervene and take the eggs ourselves and do what we call artificial incubation of those eggs to hopefully hatch some babies.
Yeah.
And depending on the situation, again, and what we're looking at, it might mean that once that baby hatches, we give it right back to mom and dad, and mom and dad does all the hard work, which is fabulous. All we have to do is turn an egg and fiddle with some temperatures, right? And in other situations, mom and dad maybe aren't able to care for the young that hatch, and then that falls to us to take care of them. It
So
is our
you raise baby birds.
Yes, yes, we do sometimes. It's not our first choice. It's never our
Right.
first choice. It is always a necessity. It's stressful. If you've ever raised children, you know how stressful it is. Um, but they can. The little guys can be fed 12 times a day over 12 hours or 14 hours. These are very long days. These are babies that can be just a couple of grams, which,
That's,
tiny. Yes, we're talking dime-sized or smaller.
oh my
And continuing to
gosh.
keep that alive is very, very nerve-wracking.
Oh my gosh, that's so small.
Yes, and some of the babies are much bigger, right? And some of them
Yeah,
are very small. They come in all different shapes and sizes.
just like
And
everybody else.
just
It's just nature, man. It's just nature.
but that's why we don't wanna do it, because they're
Yeah.
they're so
Yeah.
small and it's so stressful. So when we do intervene, like in the case of whooping cranes or these Guam kingfishers or, any of these other species, California condors, it's because we have to, and we want to ensure their species survival. So that's why we do it. And it's really, really rewarding to take this little, egg that weighed, 10 grams and then hatch this baby and then raise it and watch it, fly and
Like a
flourish,
flourish. Yeah.
and then go on and make babies of their own and maybe be
I just got little, little tingles right there.
yeah, it's probably my favorite part of being a zookeeper is the eggs and incubation and hand rearing, because it's so rewarding. As stressful as it is, it's so rewarding watching them go from the egg to the
Yeah.
little teeny tiny naked thing to a flourishing, productive member who can go on and make their own babies and
And then hanging out with the other condors in the
and yes, for reintroduction programs, being able to
Yeah.
go back to the wild, that
That's
blows my
that's
mind.
huge.
And
You see
I
those
love
things
that.
on the internet or whatever where, they're opening the box and the eagle or the whatever
Yes,
amazing creature is, and they're just taking flight. That's
yes,
gotta just bring tears when you release them like that into the wild. That's just gotta be
for sure.
total just I don't know,
Yes, it is.
whatever
It is.
whatever that emotion
It
is.
it was one of my favorite things when I did wildlife rehab all those years ago was going to the releases. I've released bald eagles, I've released barred owls and screech owls and all these different hawks, and it never got old.
Love
It
it.
never got old because it's so you know all the blood, sweat, and tears you poured into helping this animal survive, and you know you've just given it its best shot.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is incredibly rewarding and fulfilling
Love
to
that.
watch them take flight and go back out into the world and do what they were meant to do before we intervened. Because a lot of the reason for native wildlife to wind up in rehab is human fault, whether
Yeah.
it's pollution or they were shot or they were hit by a car. They're hurt and being taken out of the wild because of us. It's the very least we can do or I can do to try to fix that for them. And whether that means doing active wildlife rehab like I did, or whether that means coming on here and being an advocate for making small changes in our local communities to better protect the native wildlife that are so important to our ecosystem, I'm going to do that because that's what matters.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Uh, I love your passion. I absolutely, your passion just warms my heart. And, I think that's like the best thing to just kind of wrap this up on is how much you love it and what it is that is our responsibility as humans in this environment to protect where we are intervening,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
So I think I think if people are going to take away anything from this other than, animals are amazing, um, is that our responsibility is environmental stewardship as people. We are not on this planet alone. We share this planet with 7 billion other people, but also billions of animals. This does not belong just to us.
Yeah.
So we have a duty and a responsibility to care for the earth and everything that lives within it, which means being mindful of the choices that we make. Whether that means we take the bike to the store around the corner versus getting in the car to drive to reduce air pollution, whether that means we a couple of times a year participate in a local beach cleanup or like around White Rock Lake. You can
Hmm.
walk and clean up the litter, and you can do local community impacts like that so that things aren't getting into the waterways that'll affect the animals there that will eventually come back to people. Or maybe it means um, volunteering to um, count birds or butterflies. People love butterflies, and that's one of the things Virginia Zoo does is kind of monarch migration and safe lights out campaign where you're turning off lights during those migration times. Dallas just did a huge thing on that. They turn out the lights in downtown to reduce the chances of collisions and all of the impact of all the light pollution from the cities. It can distract the birds while they're trying to migrate south. And so being mindful of even our impact on those levels, turning out the lights, turning
And
down.
how easy is that?
It requires no effort.
No effort, just turn the lights out.
Turn the lights out. It's not hard. So you can do all of these little things and they add up.
Yeah.
Huge, huge impacts for all of the animals around the world. And I think that's what's really, really important. You don't have to go to Kenya. You don't have to go to Indonesia to make these big improvements and changes in the world. You can do it from your backyard. You can do it from your house. You can do it from your computer. It's amazing. And we don't always think about that. But
Right.
I think we should. And I think that's the message again that zoos really want to promote is we're here to support the rest of the global community in maintaining the health of our environment and our ecosystems. We're doing it through caring for the animals and providing insights and opportunities for people in our communities to do their part as well. It's going to take all of this. It's going to
Uh,
take all of this.
It is. And I just so like I said, your passion for it, if you didn't convince somebody to go do something, then I don't know why we're here. Cuz
Well,
because because I really believe that, you're speaking totally from your heart. You are speaking totally from where you sit and what you see, right? You see what is happening, and it takes not just the zookeepers in the zoos to make sure that those little babies grow up and flourish and hopefully released into the wild or flourishing and repopulating a
yes.
species. it takes everybody. And like you said, if you're walking around the lake, pick up the trash. Just take a bag. And you see people doing that as they walk, they just pick it up. And
Mhm.
it's not just making it look pretty. It's making a difference for all the little bitty creatures that
Yes.
live around that lake or that stream or that pond that maybe you don't see, but the turtles are in there and the frogs and the crawfish and all the
Yeah,
things that it all is a big daisy chain
it
to help
really is.
everybody.
It really is. And another just really easy thing people can do is stop using single-use plastic.
Yeah.
That just take a water bottle, take a refillable water bottle with you. Don't use single-use plastics. If you can, you've got a metal water bottle. It's going to be so much better for the environment. It's not going to make the lake look dirty. If you see a water bottle floating out there, if a plastic water bottle's out there, it's gross. It's bad for the environment. It looks bad. Take a refillable water bottle with you. It's a very easy change. And you know what? You're not spending $5 at the store to grab a pack of water anymore. You just
Yeah.
use your tap.
Agreed.
So easy.
Agreed.
So easy.
All right. Well, Alexandra, thank you so much for spending this time with me. You just kind of, like I said, we've known each other a long time, and we talk, and I watch some of the things on Facebook that you guys are doing, and I'm just so happy for you that you are in that spot where you love, and you're making a dent in the world, and I just want to recognize that.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate you saying that. I don't always feel like I'm making a difference, but that is my goal every day when I show up to work. I want to make a difference. And I hope that I do. I hope that there's a lasting impact, not only that I've made, but that I can encourage other people to make, because that's
Well,
the bottom line.
I think you did a little bit of that today. I think you did a little bit of that.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. Well, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Crushing It with Your Tribe. This is Alexandra Rowland, zookeeper. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next fabulous guest on the show. And thanks again, Alexandra. We will talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, Robin.
Thanks for joining us for Crushing It with Your Tribe with Texas Realtor Robin McCoy. Check out all the show notes for contact information on Robin and her guests and to access your free resources and information discussed on this episode. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a conversation. Thanks again, and we will see you next time on Crushing It with Your Tribe with Robin McCoy.